everyone, welcome or welcome back. My name is Yuna and it is May, which means it is AANHPI month, or Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. While I advocate for reading diversely and engaging with other communities and cultures and educating yourself 365 days out of the year, I think that May is a special month during which we can devote a bit of our time to reading from AANHPI authors and engaging more with those communities, honoring their cultures, their legacies, their histories. So I wanted to do something pretty similar to what I did for Black History Month, where I'm going to go through and highlight some of my favorite authors and some of my favorite books from the AANHPI community. I think it's going to be a pretty even split between books and authors that I've already read and I'm familiar with, and books and authors that I haven't yet gotten to but are on my TBR. Some of these books aren't necessarily going to be my 5-star absolute favorite books, but even though I may not have been in love with them, I still enjoyed them and want to recommend them because perhaps there are readers out there who will jive with them better than I did. I'm the authority on just about nothing, and my opinion on books is absolutely nowhere near the end all be all. So I do like to recommend books that were maybe 3-star, 3.5 stars for me, because again, there might be someone out there for whom this may be their new favorite book. That said, I'm not going to recommend any books that I hated or think are horrendous, but you get the idea. I'm suspecting that this is going to end up being a 2-parter, just like my Amazing Black Authors video, because originally I conceptualized this as being one video, and then I started writing out the books and trying to organize how I was going to go through the video, and I was like, ooh, I just don't think that I'm going to be able to talk for that long. I'll start recording this, and who knows, maybe I'm going to fly through this and I can do it in one slightly longer video, but most likely it's going to be a 2-parter and this will just be part 1. Before I get to the books, I think it is so important to talk about the fact that there is such an immense diversity and range of books to tap into when you're talking about Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander books. I mean, even if we just focused on Asian American, Asia is the biggest continent with almost 50-ish countries, and I think that a lot of times when I see recommendations for Asian authors or Asian American stories, a lot of the times we're focusing heavily on Japanese and Korean authors, and obviously, I'm Korean, I love the Korean rep, but the fact is there are so many other countries and so many other cultures from which we could be reading. Again, even if we're just looking at the Asian American part of AANHPI, we have South Asia, we have Southeast Asia, we have Southwest Asia, we have East Asia. There's a lot happening, and I want to make sure that people think to look beyond just the very popular Korean and Japanese authors that I think get circulated a lot in these recommendation lists. And not to say they don't deserve it, they deserve it, but there are others just as deserving. Same goes for the Pacific Islander portion of AAPI. I think especially in the United States, when you say AAPI, most people for PI just kind of think of like Hawaii, but there are also multiple distinct areas within Pacific Islander countries too. We have Micronesia, we have Polynesia, we have Melanesia. You get what I'm saying, right? There's just a huge array of countries and cultures to pull from and to read from when we are talking about AANHPI month. And while I'm going to try to recommend as broadly as I can and make sure I hit all of the regions, I just want to say that if you don't see your particular country represented on this list in this video or in part 2, I don't want you to be too disappointed or to think that I haven't read from that country or I don't want to read from that country or anything like that. It is literally just down to me trying to keep these videos manageable in terms of length, and I'm sure at some point I will get to talking about an author or a book from these other places. And if you have recommendations that you think that I should check out if I don't mention them in either of the videos, definitely let me know in the comments. But let's get to the books, because I'm looking at the pile in front of me, and God, I love reading diversely because there is just such an array of deep, rich, lush, colorful culture and mythology and religion and storytelling. There's just so much available when you read diversely. It's just, I'm going to kick us off with some books and authors representative of South Asia. For each of the regions, I'm going to throw a map up somewhere so you guys can get a visual of which countries I'm talking about. Now, if you're a fan of retellings and you want to read retellings of classic Hindu stories and mythology retold with a modern perspective, then you might want to check out Vaishnavi Patel. Now, Vaishnavi Patel is a newer author to me, but she writes at the intersection of colonialism and feminism and Indian mythology. I've so far only read this this one book of hers, Kaikeyi, but I do have others on my TBR, which I will talk about. So Kaikeyi is a feminist retelling of the Hindu classic Ramayana. Now, in the classic story Ramayana, Kaikeyi is the antagonistic, jealous, kind of spiteful and ambitious stepmother figure, but in this book we step away and refocus into Kaikeyi's life. We get her backstory, we get her relationships, her motivations, and we get to understand more of how she came to make the decisions that she made in Ramayana. I really enjoyed this book, even though it was not a perfect book to me by any means. I definitely had some criticisms, particularly around how heavy-handed the delivery of some of these themes were. That said, I would still recommend. I think it was an easy read, and I'm just a big fan of retellings in general. A book of hers that I haven't read that I'm really interested in is, I think, her newest release, and it is called We Dance Upon Demons. First of all, I love that name. Now, this sounds really interesting to me. It is about a main character named Nisha who lives in, I think she lives in Chicago, so she lives in the United States, and she is a reproductive health worker. I believe she works at some sort of clinic, and after touching this statue, some mysterious magical statue at a museum, she gains these supernatural powers. On one front, she is fighting a very real world grounded fight against conservatives who are very anti-reproductive healthcare, and on the other front, she is using her newfound powers to fight these supernatural forces. The story seems like a mix of Indian mythology and some very grounded real world issues like reproductive healthcare and abortion. So I'm definitely going to pick up We Dance Upon Demons, and while I'm hoping that the themes are perhaps delivered with a little more subtlety in this book, I'm still, either way, looking forward to getting to this. Now, maybe you're someone who wants to read some very colorful and playful and sharp and witty and satirical novels that have a lot to say about Sri Lankan politics, Sri Lankan history, the Sri Lankan Civil War. And I definitely suggest you check out Shahan Karunatilaka. This is another author that I have been introduced to rather recently, but I just think that he is so unique and has such a recognizable and fun voice. The only book of his that I've read so far is The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, and I've talked about this in a couple videos now pretty recently, but this book is about Mali, who is a war photographer, and he wakes up in this waiting room, processing room in the afterlife. He has died and he has absolutely no recollection of how he died, why he died, who killed him. He's told that he has 7 moons, or basically 7 days, to figure out what happened and to kind of get his stuff in order to prepare himself to move on and to become reincarnated. Again, this is funny and dark and satirical, and it has a lot to say about the Sri Lankan Civil War and the things that happened during that time, and I think that it is a really unique read. And if you like some funky narrative structure, their second person point of view, then absolutely try this book out. The other book of his that I have not read and I'm very interested in picking up is Chinaman. The summary of this book describes it as part tragedy, part comedy, part mystery, and part drunken memoir. The book uses the sport cricket as a medium through which to talk about Sri Lanka and the Sri Lankan Civil War. The main character is a retired or dying drunk sports journalist who goes on some sort of journey to find this legendary cricket player. It sounds like it has some of the same bones as Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. It has, satire, it has this dark comedic tone. We have a potentially unreliable narrator, and all of this is being used to deliver some serious commentary about Sri Lanka. I'm also particularly drawn to this book because actually the first time that I ever tried my hand at cricket was when I was visiting Sri Lanka years ago. This was almost, I don't remember, I think I was still a teenager, but I went and I visited Sri Lanka, and the family that I was staying with, I remember they took me to the back of their house and they were trying to explain cricket to me because I had never seen or played the sport before, and I was awful, but I think of that time very fondly, so it seems like it might be a really fun book for me to pick up, so I will at some point be getting to Chinaman. Alright, next author is for my YA readers. Are you looking for a young adult story that packs a punch and is written by an author who is not afraid to hurt your feelings? But let me introduce Sabah Tahir, a Pakistani-American author who has traumatized thousands of her readers. I'd say she's probably best known for her Ember in the Ashes series, so I'll start with that. The Ember in the Ashes Quartet is a series that's set in a bloody, ruthless, ancient Rome-inspired world that is ruled by this empire called the Martial Empire. The series starts with 2 main characters, Laia and Elias. Laia is a girl who ends up working as a spy for the rebel forces when her brother is captured and disappeared by the Empire. The rebels tell her that if she will spy for them, then they will help her find him. And Elias is on the other side of this conflict. He is the star student, star soldier at this military academy. Laia infiltrates the academy academy and she's working there as a slave while getting information, and it's there that their paths cross and the story sort of takes off from there. Later on in the story, we get another point of view, another main character who is Helene, and Helene is Elias's best friend when they are at the military academy at the beginning of the story. Now this is a big sweeping adventure. It's got a bunch of action, it has politics, it has multiple romantic pairings, and there's also a lot of magic. Actually, at the beginning of the series, I didn't know just how much magic there would be, but as you go on, more and more elements of magic are introduced. I love this series. I don't by any means think that it's a perfect series. I definitely had some criticisms of the storytelling and different elements, but I still think that if someone was going to ask me for a recommendation for a darker young adult series, fantasy with romance and action, then I would put this high on my list of recommendations. I definitely suggest you check it out. The Ember and the Ashes series does have a sequel series, and I have the first book here, Air. This is the first book in the duology, and I think the second book is being released, I don't know, end of this year or early next year. I don't remember if an official release date has been shared, but it should be coming out sort of soon, so I wanted to wait to read the duology once I could binge all of it. So when the second book comes out, I will be reading Air and that other book and seeing what has happened in the world of the Ember of the Ashes. Another book by Sabah that I would recommend is All My Rage. This is also YA, but this one is contemporary fiction. This book is set in America, I think in California, so there's no magic, there's no fantasy, and it follows two Pakistani American teenagers, Noor and Sal. Noor and Sal are dealing with their own sets of traumas, family issues, family conflicts, family secrets, their own different things that they are grieving, but they are also trying to navigate their relationship with each other. They were close friends, but something has happened before the beginning of this book that has left them in a bit of a tense state, so they're trying to navigate their feelings for each other. And of course, while all of this is happening, they are dealing with racism, they're dealing with questions about their future because they're in high school and they don't really know what their next steps are in life, especially as children of immigrant families. This book is very dark, but in a completely different way from Ember in the Ashes. I think this is a really tragic and powerful and relatable story, and even though this book is specifically about two Pakistani American kids, I think that as a child of immigrants, I also resonated very deeply with the story, and I think that if any readers out there are also, from immigrant families who have struggled through things like owning small businesses or just financial struggles and things like that, then I think that this is something that you might want to read. Again, very powerful story, and I think that even if you aren't usually a YA reader, this might be one that you could enjoy. Now I'm going to talk about a couple South Asian authors who I have not read yet, but am looking forward to. The first book is Our Beautiful Boys by Samir Pandya. This one is giving me Beartown vibes, but instead of hockey, we have football and an Indian star player who is at the heart of the story, I think. The three star players of this high school football team are accused of attacking another student, and from there the story takes off and we get the secrets of these kids and their parents and their community starting to unravel. This book is supposed to talk about the intertwining experiences of race and class and privilege and the expectations that come with all of those things, so it sounds like it could be a really powerful read, and I did enjoy Beartown. I only read the first book in that series, but whatever. I have this one on hold at my library right now, and I think I should be able to get my hands on it relatively soon, so once I get to it, I will report back. The next author is actually someone I can't believe I haven't gotten to, because I feel like I've had this person on my list of authors to read for, I don't know, like 10 years, and there's no real reason that I haven't picked up her books yet, so I'm going to prioritize this author for 2026. That is none other than Arundhati Roy, and specifically I would like to read God of Small Things. I feel like I have basically only heard good things about this book, and again, I just don't know why I haven't gotten to it yet. This is a family saga set in India, and I've heard the writing style described as super duper lyrical and very descriptive and full of metaphors, and I think one person even described her writing style as maximalist, and that sounds really fun. I feel like I've been reading a lot of books that have been written in more reserved and restrained prose and have still been powerful, but I do love really lyrical writing, so I feel like this might scratch an itch that I've had for a while. The story itself, I think, centers two characters who are twins and is supposed to tackle things like caste and colonialism and forbidden love and expectations. So that all sounds incredibly powerful, and I love me a good family saga, so Gotta Small Things, I'm putting you high on my TBR. She also has a more recent publication, which I think is called Mother Mary Come to Me, or Mother Mary Come Get Me, something like that. And I think that this is a memoir, and I'd also like to pick this up, but I think I want to read the memoir after I've read A Gotta Small Things. If you have read Roy and have thoughts, definitely let me know in the comments, because again, this is an author that I feel like I've been meaning to read for so long, so I will be prioritizing her, but would love to know your thoughts if you've read her stuff. I know I've barely scratched the surface, but I'm going to move on from South Asia to Southeast Asia, and once again I will put a map up on the screen so you can see the range of countries that I'm talking about when I say Southeast Asia. Again, I absolutely will not be able to in this video cover authors from every single one of these countries, but hopefully over the course of the next year, next couple years, I will be reading diversely enough and sharing books from these countries, even if it's not in one concentrated video. But let's say you're looking for an author who's exploring sexuality and masculinity and intimacy and family trauma using highly lyrical, dense, and very aesthetic language, then might I suggest you pick up Ocean Vuong. Ocean Vuong is a Vietnamese-American novelist and poet, and I'd say he's probably most famous for this book On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. But I would say that all of his work that I have read has been very deeply and vulnerably informed by his experience being raised by immigrant women, his own Vietnamese identity and history. I've read two of his poetry collections, Time is a Mother and also Night Sky with Exit Wounds, but I have no idea where I put Night Sky with Exit Wounds. I think it's somewhere around here, but I just couldn't find it. So I read the two poetry collections. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is an epistolary work, and it is about a man named Little Dog, or called Little Dog, and he is writing a letter to his illiterate mother talking about his family's history and trauma and just his experience living as a queer Vietnamese American growing up in America. Both his novel and his poetry collections are very rich and dense and stylistic and lyrical and metaphorical, and honestly, I don't know that his style is necessarily my favorite type of poetry to read. All of his writing is really powerful and intimate. I think it's just, for me, that intimacy and the vulnerability wasn't always that easy to access because of his very metaphorical and lyrical style. Sometimes it felt a little too opaque for me personally, and this is not a criticism of his writing style. I think it's more just personal preference and compatibility. I know there's so many people who have read his stuff and immediately felt very impacted and seen and spoken to. It was just, for me, I felt like it took some time for me to decode what his very stylistic writing was saying, and I think because of that I couldn't really read a lot of his work at one time. I could only do it in small doses because it required me to put in work to really understand what he was saying at the heart of his writing. It's beautiful stuff, don't get me wrong. I do love it and I do recommend it. It's just, I think that if you are someone who doesn't like to have to think a bit about the words and the phrases and the intentionality of what the author is writing, then this might feel like a bit of work to get through some of his stuff, but it is beautiful and it is very intimate and masterfully written. I know he recently came out with another book and I'm fully blanking on the name. Did it have something like goddess in the title? I don't remember. I'll put it on the screen, but I do want to get to his new release as well. Moving along, maybe you're looking for an author who blends very poetic and lush and dreamlike and tender prose with experimental narrative structures and sweeping storytelling and emotional character arcs, then maybe you have to read Simon Jimenez. Simon Jimenez is a Filipino-American writer, and I've only read this one book by him so far, The Spear Cuts Through Water, but it has quickly become one of my favorite stories. This is a sweeping, fantastical, dreamy story of two young men who are escorting a fallen or trapped goddess across this magical land, and the story is told in a very unconventional narrative structure. You jump on the same page, you jump from first person to third person to second person, and you jump from different characters' points of views without any demarcation or indication that the point of view has changed. So it can be very confusing and jarring at first, but if you can get through that, or if you can kind of let yourself melt into that storytelling and let it wash over you, I think that you are in for such an incredible time. It's a very interesting structure as well, because we have that main story that I described, but it's sort of nested within another story. It's very hard to describe, but basically there's a person in the future who is being told the story of these two men, and you're also getting the story as it's happening. It's very hard to explain. It's a whole experience, and I highly recommend it. It's so beautiful, and I think that if you're willing to push past being a little confused, perhaps in the beginning, you are going to get rewarded. Simon Mendes has another book, I think his debut book, which is called The Vanished Birds, and I definitely want to pick this up. This was described, I think, as a lyrical space opera that puts together fantasy and science fiction. It sounds like it's probably another trippy sort of story, because I think it's told across different stretches of time and space. There's a space captain named Nia who finds a mysterious boy who can't speak but has this magical power that lets him jump across the universe, or he can travel insane distances with this power. The story is told across, I think, literally thousands of years, or 1,000 years, and it talks about things like found family and capitalism and colonialism and corporate power, and also talks about the tenderness of human connection, and all of that just sounds like an incredible trippy time. So I definitely want to pick up The Vanished Birds. That's it for Southeast Asia for now. Like I said, if you have recommendations, especially from the countries that I didn't talk about, which is honestly most of them, please leave them in the comments. I'm genuinely looking for recommendations. I would love to hear your thoughts. Next, we're going to talk about books from Pacific Islander and Hawaiian authors. Again, I'm going to throw up on the screen a couple maps, one for Hawaii and one for Pacific Islanders, which covers Micronesia, Polynesia, Melanesia. If you would like to read a story that has an incredibly frenetic and chaotic narrative structure that is probably most definitely going to confuse you at first, and also has some really heavy content, dark content that might be difficult to grapple with, then might I suggest you try The Bone People by Carrie Home. Carrie Home is a Maori author from New Zealand, and this book I talked about recently. I read this pretty recently, and this book was a really difficult read. The story is very much about these three very broken and troubled and troubling people and their relationships with each other, and like I said, this big, dark, horrific secret that threatens to ruin this very tentative bond and safe space that they begin to build with each other. This and The Spear Cuts Through Water, they're both very unique in their very unapologetically confusing narrative structures, but this one felt, I don't know, the energy of this one was a lot more, I think I said frenetic, and that's, I think, maybe the best way I can describe it. Whereas The Spear Cuts Through Water, while it was a bit disorienting, it still felt like there was this fluidity. With this one, I don't know how to explain it. It felt almost overwhelming, but it is definitely a really powerful story, and I love the incorporation of Maori words and phrases throughout the book. And in the back, they have a glossary that has the translations of some of the Maori words and phrases, and I would actually recommend you do this maybe partly reading it physically and partly reading it as an audiobook, because the audiobook person, I think, does a really great job, and I think you might also want to have the physical book on hand, because when the points of views and, you know, first person, second person, third person shifts happen, it's sometimes helpful to see it on the page and try to get a better sense of what's happening, because I think just on audio it was even more confusing. Maybe you're looking for something not quite so heavy and you want a shorter nonfiction, then I might recommend to you No Country for Eight Spotted Butterflies by Julian Aguan. Julian Aguan is an author from Guam, and this book is right at the intersection of environmental and climate justice and indigenous rights. This isn't necessarily a memoir. It's described, I think, as a lyrical essay, but I think that because Julian incorporates a lot of his own experiences as a child and his experiences growing up in Guam with his community, it felt like a memoir to me in a lot of ways, and it's a really beautiful look again at indigenous stewardship of land and specifically within Guam and with this specific community. I don't have a whole lot else to say, but I think that Guam is definitely one of those places where people don't think about or read about or interface with that often. So I think if you want a short but impactful introduction to maybe reading about Guam, then this might be a great place to start. The next book I want to talk about is The House of Many Gods by Kiana Davenport. This is a book that I read over a decade ago, I'm pretty sure, and I really don't remember much about it. I know that I have a copy at my parents' house and I wasn't able to get it in time for this video, but I read it so long ago that I barely remember, so I would love to do a reread, and I hope it's as good as I'm thinking that it was, because when I read it the first time I thought that it was really powerful. While I don't remember specifics of the plot, my general sense that I had gotten was that it was written in a very sort of mythical and fantastical writing style. Again, maybe this is completely wrong and I'm misremembering, but that's what I think I remember of the book. House of Many Gods is a complicated love story that is told between Hawaii and Russia. It's this interwoven story of this Hawaiian family that is struggling against some very real things like poverty and military occupation. And I believe a man comes from Russia, and we get a love story that starts and it kind of goes back and forth between Hawaii and Russia. Again, I might be misleading you a lot, but I'm pretty sure that's what the story is about. And again, I know that when I first read it, years and years ago, I really liked it. I loved it, in fact, and I would definitely like to find my copy and give it a reread to see how I feel about it now. Next, I want to talk about some Hawaiian Pacific Islander books that I have not read yet, but I'm looking forward to getting to. The first is From a Native Daughter, Colonialism and Sovereignty in Hawaii. This is by Haunani K. Trask, and this is a book that I actually purchased when I was in Hawaii, but it is being shipped to me from a university press, and there's been a bunch of delays with the shipping because of the weather, so it might take a while to get to me, and that's fine. I have no problem waiting. This was published in 1993 and has been recommended to me as a foundational read that I should definitely get to if I'm interested in engaging with conversations about colonialism and sovereignty and all those things in Hawaii. It's described as a provocative, well-reasoned attack against the rampant abuse of Native Hawaiian rights, institutional racism, and gender discrimination, and has generated heated debates in Hawaii and throughout the world. The next book I want to talk about is actually another book that I ordered along with From a Native Daughter, so it has also been delayed for a while, but I'm hoping it'll get to me in the next month or so. This book is Indigenous Pacific Islander Eco-Literature. This is an anthology, and it features a number of indigenous authors from different points in their careers, from Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia, and also just from the general diaspora around the world. The description says, within these pages, the reader will encounter a wild garden of genres, including poetry, chant, short fiction, novel excerpts, creative nonfiction, visual text, and even a dramatic play, all written in multilingual offerings of English, Pacific languages, Pidgin, and translation. That sounds right up my freaking alley, so I'm so excited to get to this, and I think that one of the goals of this anthology is to represent the diversity and biodiversity that exists across the Pacific. I think that I'm going to love this collection. I don't see how I wouldn't. I am just keeping my eyes on the tracking number and hoping that the books get to me soon. I feel like I'm a broken record because I'm excited to read all these books, but this next book I'm really excited about. I think this is a newer release, and when I read the description, I was like, this was written for me. That book is The Killing Spell by Shea Kauwe. This is Shea's debut novel, and it's an urban fantasy that uses a language-based magic system that's rooted in the Hawaiian language, and if that doesn't sound like it's written for me, I don't know what does. In this spellbinding fantasy debut set in a future where language magic reigns, a young Hawaiian woman must solve a murder to clear her name. So this is set in an alternate version of our world in which 200 years ago there was this massive flood that submerged all of the Hawaiian islands and unleashed this magic into the world. There are 5 Hawaiian clans that have moved to California, and their situation is pretty precarious because they're living there on a treaty and the treaty is about to run out. The main character is Kia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Kia maybe, and she is the youngest of the 5 clan leaders, and she's basically surviving by selling Hawaiian language spells. There is a murder that seems to kick off the events of the story, and this murder is important because the person is killed using a death spell, which based on the magic system, and I'm assuming this is going to be explained, but based on the magic system, that spell could only have been created in the Hawaiian language, and because Kea is supplying and has been selling these spells, people begin to suspect that she is the one that killed this murder victim. I love languages so much. I love when languages are incorporated into stories and into magic, and so I'm so excited to read this. I actually think that I need to do a video at some point that talks about books I love that incorporate languages, because it's just so near and dear to my heart. I think that languages are so powerful. They're so powerful. They hold so much history and intention and imagination and ways of thinking about the world. I could go on about languages forever and ever. So this book is speaking to me, and I have to read it. And finally, the last book that I'm going to talk about that I would like to read from this region is a collection called This is Paradise, written by Christiana Kahakawila. This is a short story collection, and I've heard that it is a very gritty and dark and realistic look at life in Hawaii that goes on beyond what tourists see. The different stories touch on different aspects of Native Hawaiian life in the modern day, such as tensions between locals and tourists. There's tradition and the modern age, the search for identity in this ever-evolving world, the legacy of military occupation, and just a whole host of other things. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this book or this author, so I don't know what to expect, but I'll do a read and I will report back. That is it for all the books I'm going to talk about today under the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander section, and I was absolutely right. There is no way that I'm also going to talk about all the books I wanted to mention from East Asia and Southwest Asia. We're gonna do a two-parter. So if you want to hear all my recommendations and the books that I have on my TBR from East Asian authors and Southwest Asian authors, then definitely stick around for part 2 of this. It'll probably come out next week. I know I haven't been here very long, but I hope that if you have been following my channel for any amount of time, then you know that I am someone who very much values reading diversely and thinking diversely and engaging with different cultures and languages and modes of thinking and experiencing the world. So this is such a pleasure for me to put together a video like this, and I hope that you have either seen some of the books that you love represented here, or I hope that you have picked up some books to add to your TBR. My appetite for reading diversely is never going to be satiated, so definitely let me know. I would love to hear your favorite books that you've read or are looking forward to from either South Asia, Southeast Asia, or Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander authors. One last thing, I don't know if all of you have caught on, but I started putting bloopers at the ends of my videos where I share little outtakes or just, I don't know, behind the scenes moments that I think are honest and hopefully a little entertaining. So if you haven't noticed those, or you don't usually stick around until the very end, then definitely do so, and maybe check the last couple videos to see the bloopers, because I look a damn fool in all of them. Look out for part 2, where I'll be finishing up this list and covering books from East Asia and Southwest Asia. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. The other book, ooh,